Hello, welcome to my series about all
Explorers music. Let's start with Wigglytuff's Guild remix. Sometimes we have music where the characters travel around a map. It's fun to see and hear, and it gives the game a greater sense of adventure. This map music is mostly percussion, and it's a great opportunity to talk about timbre. Composers can break down percussion into a couple different sound profiles: material, pitch, and decay. Right now, snare and hi-hat have the same pitch and decay, but differing material. We add tambourine, which is sort of in between the two material-wise, but can adjust its decay. Then we add claps so we can have a completely new material: human flesh. You may notice something in this remix. All these instruments are really high. This is where they change things up by adding a medium-pitched instrument, the ice bell. It's probably not an ice bell, but who cares, it's a cool sounding name. Percussion's definitely one of my weak points, so small things like choosing instruments based on parameters really blows my mind. The one thing this track is missing is my favorite percussion instrument.
The Vibraslap.
There's also a tuba and xylophone, but they aren't super important. Their purpose is adding a bit to the remix. Anyways, we're going on the map to Drenched Bluff, the second dungeon. Like Beach Cave, it has a very 7th chordy sound going on. It's an ABC form with really interesting chords. A lot of the A section revolves around this technique called harmonic planing. You pick a voicing and translate it through a bunch of pitches. This technique is used right up until the end of the A section, where the bass clef differs slightly from the treble. This creates interest because harmonic planing is really boring. It only works if you're at a super loud club or if you're a Frenchman who regularly inserts radium up your ass. This is why slightly changing up the technique makes the piece a lot cooler. The B section continues this, altering lines here and there to create some really whack progressions. Remember, kids, you're just a half step away from making something sound strange. Remember, kids? I don't want to say kids. I'm not allowed around kids. The melody in A becomes the counter melody in C. This is a great strategy for beginners. If you have an A section you like and you don't know how to continue, put the A section in the background of your B section to make something new that thematically works. Don't eat shellos. When I was 6, I thought that was doo-doo feces. Job Clear is another Rescue Team remix. On the surface, it's a nice J-pop melody. Underneath the surface is some interesting orchestration and ear candy. Drum, synth bass, guitar, Hammond, and strings are some pretty standard instruments. Some non-standard instruments are flute, harp, marimba, dulcimer, kalimba, and music box. These instruments mimic and harmonize the melody and are used for special effects. The kalimba has an interesting counter melody in the B section. It's in a similar range to the main melody, but stands out because of its naturally staccato articulation and quick gestures against the legato melody. We get Spoink's Pearl, and he gives us 2,000. So the guild takes a 90% cut of our cash. Game-wise, this makes sense for two reasons. It makes you hate chat up more, and it keeps the economy intact. It incentivizes the player to buy seeds and berries, which are a lot more useful than orbs and gummies at this stage. Those are far more expensive and specialized. Lore-wise, it makes sense too. Can you imagine the rent Wigglytuff has to deal with? He has a cliffside property. Wait, we do too? Hold on, you have to pay the 90% cut after you graduate and live on your own? Okay, Chadot's grilling on company policy makes no sense. He doesn't even need a grill. That's a beak.
What's up, the world? Johnny Dang. Present Black Diamond. I told you.
What Chadot doesn't know is I've been in contact with this very nice man over the phone who told me to redeem thousands in Walmart gift cards. I now have a golden ribbon, and if I can get 10 others to join... Ugh. While Explorers is often praised for its story, I'm not a huge fan of the characters. They don't have any standout traits, and the only way to tell any of the guild members apart is by what verbal tick they have. We meet Bidoof. Just look at the guy. You can tell he uploads American Dad intro speedruns to YouTube.com. Ugh, I can tell by the stench. Bidoof takes us to Treasure Town to show us the facilities, then doesn't talk about them. In honor of Bidoof, I will also not talk about Treasure Town at all. That's right, I will not mention the best song in the game. I will not mention the bank, the Kecleon shops, the storage facilities, the dojo, the deadbeat dad that wants to be claimed by the sea, the MoveLink shop. I will not talk about how the use of Grace Notes instrumentation and hand claps suggest folk influences. I'll not talk about the AAB structure with B starting on scale degree 4, the most common Nintendo formula for every song that makes 30-year-old balding men cry about days of yore. Treasure Town is a fun place brimming with life. I like that the town residents change up their dialogue depending on how far you are in the story. There's also two brothers, Meryl and Azumarill. Another Rescue Team remix. The pleasant waltz with a great melody. There's some really cool dissonances, like the diminished arpeggio leading back into the beginning of the track. I'm also a fan of this flat 9 chord. For those who don't know... Wait, how do I explain this?
This is Dwayne. Today we're going to take up the flat 9th chord. It's not used a lot except by, more advanced pianists, but it
more
should
advanced
be because it's
what?
and it's a good tightener. So if C7th is a pregnant chord.
Good lord, this isn't heartwarming at all. Flat 9s are usually extra dissonant dominant chords, which make the resolution to a tonic a lot more noticeable and satisfying. Explorers is a kid's game, sure, but it's totally fine to have some dissonance. Speaking of, when Squirtle contacts things, he gets clairvoyant visions of the past and future. The music represents these ominous visions with the best song in the game. Yoshi finally learned his lesson from Tiny Woods, and realized whole tone scales are really eerie sounding. And it's not just whole tone scales, it's symmetry that's eerie. We're used to diatonic music, which has this ebb and flow. The asymmetry between some of these tones creates tension and resolution. This is really satisfying to the ear. When everything is exactly measured, it sounds unfamiliar and off-putting. That's just part of the equation. We have lots of augmented fifths, a step apart from each other throughout the whole piece. Right on top of each other at the beginning, in a half step in the middle, and a whole step apart at the end. In my opinion, the drum beat neutralizes the scariness of the pitched material, and gives the track a more steadfast, mysterious character. This reminds me of the time I went to a jazz concert with my friend. They were playing the weirdest stuff, but because there was a beat, everything was okay in the end. Then the main band came out, and there were interpretive dancers who were doing Fortnite flosses, because a game just came out. This enraged this one guy who started screaming and vomiting all over my friend. Wait a minute, wasn't that me? What's the deal with this growing anxiety anyways? You're just hanging out with Meryl Nazuma. Oh, good gravy.
You got any vanilla?
I can do that.
This bit was brought to you by trustworthy parents on commonsensemedia.com. Come on, it's a kid's game. Having a pedophile in a rated E seems out of place. Like everyone's just looking for trouble where it isn't present. Also, keep in mind that this is a Japanese game. If Drowsy was a child predator, he wouldn't take a Zurel to Mount Bristle. You go to the Tokyo subway system. Now that that's out of the way, Drowsy's clearly a kidnapper, and we need to stop him. tense music with a lot of layers. We have the bass, the chords, the counterline, and the melody. Everything's pretty simple, but the counterline was composed in a super cool way, I think. I didn't write this, but here's how I would come up with this idea. Start with a rhythm and a harmony. Cycle through the harmony, but repeat the last digit on the next beat. The rest of the phrase is less formulaic, but it matches the rhythm of the piece. I love building stuff like this in my own music. It's super satisfying when you pull it off. This is the first part of the game where Torchic grows a pair and runs after the outlaw. We find ourselves in Mount Bristle, which has the best song in the game. This song is weird. We have minor ninth glissandos, the most dissonant interval. Heavily syncopated backing track. This polyrhythmic section, and a diminished chord climax. How do all these things relate to each other? The answer is tension. We go all out in harmony and rhythm. Doesn't mess with your senses too much because it's spread out throughout the song, and it really makes you want to rescue a Zurill. Hey, Drowsy!
Bring it.
The accompaniment is in 12/8 while the melody is in 3/2. The drums switch between a 12/8 feel and a 3/2 feel. Everything culminates in a climax in 7. Wow, these rhythms are sure complex. How complex is a harmony? It isn't. It uses a combination of plain old D minor chords and plainer harmony from earlier, for a bit more spice.
That's the spice.
When writing music for a boss battle track that will be heard multiple times, it's important to make something accessible and pleasant sounding. There's a nice balance struck between complex rhythm and simple harmony. A big influence on the soundtrack is Chrono Trigger, and Explorers does sort of the inverse of Chrono Trigger's complex harmony and simple rhythm in Boss Battle 2. 6 and 12 are great numbers for messing around with rhythm since they are highly composite and have many possible subdivisions. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I'm not a nerd. You beat up Drowsy, the police take him away, and the day ends with Torchic talking more about this Pokemon world, which brings us to the Time Gear remix. Side note, this is a weird name for a track. I get that the Time Gear theme is more fleshed out and all, but come on. You see, Time Gear's number 61, but we're on number 20. There's a better name for this than remix, especially if you haven't heard the song already. Could've named it Time Gear Prelude, or Old Time Gear. 8-Bit Music Theory already covered the interesting stuff with this track. There isn't much to say here, because it's long measured music for a heavy lore cutscene. The music is underneath the story at this point, and it wants you to pay attention to the narrative. How time gears are responsible for the world spinning around, and how catastrophic it would be for someone to swipe them. That's all for now. Next episode we talk about feet.